Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continued playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice and Third Reich events. Let's keep this going. I'm a bit anxious to get to playing. I've been watching a few episodes of Oh My God's playthrough of his invasion of Barbarossa, or well, invasion of Russia and Operation Barbarossa. Very interesting, very informative. Some of his early war stuff I'm not terribly interested in because he went rather far off, at least in my idea of off the historical path. And it's not wrong if you want to play that way, I'm not suggesting that, but I guess I'm looking at more historically likely, situations. So that's, just sort of the way I like to play. It's not a right or wrong, it's just preferences. Alright, let's see. So I was a bit less interested in some of his earlier stuff. But I wanted to see how he was handling. And he has the similar grand desire to keep the Soviets from retreating into the swamps, as I do for my next playthrough, just to not let it happen. I think we may be going about it somewhat differently once I get there. I'm going to try a few things differently than what he's done. As you can see, we're about ready to have a massive amounts of ICs hit. Some of the provinces that I've put a second one to start building there, where we have a heavy industry, such as here, to make sure that we keep those going. But once we get most of these, we're going to have a bunch of aircraft. We need some more escorts and convoys built. As you've seen, I like to use various supply operations to the north, and that will need escorts, and into the Soviet Union and Mediterraneans that will also need escorts. So we're going to be building some of those. Now it's Japan doing, and it's conquesting China reasonably well. We're getting very near Shanghai. I don't believe in, just as you may have realized from listening to me talk, to me history, when I was really young, I was, didn't like history at all, because I'm talking fairly young. Growing up on the west coast of the United States, the history that you're sort of taught is history in America, which is appropriate, but it was all dates, people's names, and place names that I was entirely, unfamiliar with, because they were, on the other side of the continent. Didn't know anything about that, and remember these dates. And that's not the way my mind works. And later on, when I started to study history, and the way I study it is causes and effects and relationships between events and people and things. And yeah, I got to know, December 7, 1941 for the U.S. entry into World War II. But if we were having a test on what date, what happened and when, and I'm going to fail it, quite honestly. But so I know causes and effects. But so like right now, I think Japan's moving in this close to Shanghai, I think is a bit early. There were several incidents around this time. One which might be the Japanese bombed several, but particularly I know U.S. gunboats that were patrolling up and along these rivers into these lakes sort of protecting American trading assets, as well as some actions in and around Shanghai that Japan officially apologized for and made some reparations. And I don't really think they started to come into this part of China until the outbreak of World War II, 1939 or whatever. So I think they're a bit ahead of schedule there. So from an Axis point of view, that's a good thing, but just as a history. And so there was a lot of tension because there was extraterritoriality recognized by reluctantly, I will readily admit, but recognized by the Chinese government of a French zone, an international zone, as parts of the cities. So the Europeans had a very strong influence into this part of China, and a very large European population, I would say, at least relatively, compared to other parts. Not that they in any way outnumbered the local Chinese. That's not anywhere near consideration, but they just had a lot of trading, a lot of Russian exiles there. So any incidents that were happening in and around Shanghai very much showed up on the world stage and not just be sort of contained within the conflict between Japan and China. And Japan really had to be aware of that. It would be one of the places that I could see, if we were going to build a more true historical map, I could see turning Shanghai into its own little mini one province state. Obviously that's overstating the extraterritoriality of the very small, say 8 blocks by 10 blocks or something. I mean, they weren't very big sectors that were actually completely, under foreign control, direct, administration. But even the Bund, which was, I gather, the Bund I understand to mean league or whatever in English, but the Bund was the sort of the waterfront, I gather, in Shanghai, and obviously that's the German word for it, that were all European built and owned buildings. And even though that was in an officially administered Chinese area, the Chinese were primarily just bribed entirely by the European powers and businesses, and they're the ones that were running at least that part of the city. So I could see creating Shanghai as its own mini-state. Obviously Macau and Hong Kong aren't mini-states, they're part of the colonial empires, but I could see turning those into a single state province. And the other one, of course, is Danzig. I would create Danzig as a puppet of Poland, but that allows German military access. So you could start the war with both German and Polish units in occupation of Danzig, which was quite historical because there were both countries in occupation there, because it was the free city of Danzig, the region thereof. The other one is Tangiers. This should be the Tangiers International Zone. It was another sort of multi-nationally administered free city, so it being part of Spain should not be. It was occupied by the Spanish nationalists on the day that Paris surrendered to the German advance. So Spain used and it was planned before the fall of Paris, and I don't think Spain was quite following it that close, but knew that they did the occupation during the the distraction of the German invasion of France to cover it. Now they still allowed a fair amount of the British and French administrators to sort of stay there. They didn't kick them all out, but they basically annexed it functionally through to the end of the war. So those three would be sort of interesting sort of single city states that could be as independent. It would be interesting. And which could cause, with the new system for Hearts of Iron 4, the world tension levels. So world tension level increases when Japan occupies Shanghai. World tension level obviously would raise primarily with just the simple, well, you could have it Germany annexing, or one way or another, or whatever, Danzig without an actual war with Poland, but that action would raise world tension. Maybe not as much as declaring war on Poland, but would still raise that, as well as raising with the new system world tension with Spain occupying Tangiers. So just some things to think about for possible modding, because I don't think they're going to do any of that with Hearts of Iron 4 in the basic game, but they could be contributing elements to it. It would be quite interesting. Militarily, I agree they're not significant. If you're just looking at this as a war game, doesn't really matter. But as a political strategy element to a war game, it could be. So, okay, support weapons have advanced. That would be this one. We're getting ready to up our various infantry types. Gave us that, but that's not till 44 that we get to increase new elements. Well, let's just go for this. We have the ability to build some of those units. Increase that. Now, I've already sent the start of the other project, though of course I can cancel it. But not just yet. We're going to improve the standard branch infantry. It will also allow us to research paratroopers, which we need to do fairly quickly. To do that first, but I don't know. I'm hoping a few other texts that we'll be able to shift. Hopefully they come available soon. Politics, we're still getting good results there for us because we want to be highly popular. Okay, like that. Decryption machines have advanced. We're going to shift them to paratroopers. Get that activated. And we noticed a few more ICs come on the map. Okay, getting ready to do that. Get all those. Still. I just have some of these here, so I'm pre-buffered a bit. I know some of you have your grave concerns over Hearts of Iron 4. I'm highly looking forward to it. I have my concerns if you've watched some of my other sort of review of the footage that I gave. Okay, how are we doing for money? We got enough money. Now we'll leave Norway alone. No. No. But I have very high hopes for small fuel tank. Very high hopes for it. Okay, medium bomber. Bulgaria. Yes, we want good relations with Bulgaria. No. Turkey. Yes. Finland. Oh yes. Unlike the last game, I'm bound and determined to get Finland into the Axis prior to the start of World War II, or I mean prior to the start of the invasion of the Soviet Union. Lots of events. As you can see, we got lots and lots and lots of trades with them. And where are they? To the top. Okay, so they're drifting towards the Axis quite well. I mean, they have a natural tendency to drift towards the Allies because I think they're listed as a democracy. It's with Mannerheim, maybe not completely correct, but they were definitely more pro-democracy than pro-fascist or pro-communist, that's for sure. Okay, stop trade with China or continue. Let's see the outbreak of the war. I think we're going to do this because we're going to go down the Japanese path here. And this is the chance to take it. All right. Okay. Negotiations between the Prime Minister of Czechoslovakia, Milan Hodza, has begun negotiations with the Sudeten Party on the national question, which is over the Sudetenland being part of Czechoslovakia or not. And that's Conrad headline there. So good. We're stirring up trouble. Okay, the Wilhelm Gustloff is finished. It is one of the first purpose-built cruise liners, and the difference for people, a lot of them not Americans, and maybe people who don't understand the sort of the term differences. They had, especially the late 19th century, early 20th century, they had a lot of ocean liners, transatlantic ocean liners, like the famous Titanic, of course, and we have the other one, the Lusitania, which its sinking helped very much bring the U.S. into World War I. They were passenger ships designed to carry passengers from one destination, namely like Britain or France, across the Atlantic to the U.S. and then vice versa go back. Where that's a passenger liner or an ocean liner. Where a cruise liner was meant to take people on a cruise. Wilhelm Gustloff did like some to Norway, so they go up to Norway with a set of passengers and cruise along the Norwegian coast in summer, and then take all those passengers back to Hamburg or wherever it was they started from. So it was a instead of taking, in which the earlier ships that the KdF was running as a cruise ship were originally set up as passenger liners. This was one of the, if not the first, as it's saying here. Yeah, I made the event, but I'm taking other sources for it. Set up as a cruise liner for a holiday vessel, not designed to take lots of passengers to a location and leave them there and pick up other passengers in return. So that was sort of the big difference. It's a holiday ship. 19th century world did not have the concept of holiday ships for people. The rich elite would travel around wherever, whenever they wanted to, and sure, the non-rich elite of various economic levels, yeah, they would go on holidays, but that was just sort of little local things, not like you were going to have a ship dedicated to it. So this was part of the Nazi states' outreach, if you will, to the working people, and trying to promote its popularity and the success of its ideology, and including and particularly within the economic realms, that you should have, as an average working person, leisure time, and you should have leisure activities, not just, oh, you get Sunday off or you get Saturday and Sunday off to do with what you want. You will get holidays off and be able to go places. We've talked earlier about the NSKK and driving trips around Germany as well as other countries. This was another aspect of this Nazi ideology. And unlike sort of jumping into modern commentary, modern neo-Nazi thought, and I'm far from an expert on it, but I've watched some shows on the History Channel mostly about it. It is primarily an ideology of hate. And you can run down whether they're blacks or Jews or whoever it is that they're hating. It's primarily an ideology, it seems, to promote hate. And I'm far from saying that the Nazi ideology of Germany in the 1930s and 40s didn't have its hate aspects. It absolutely did have its hate aspects. Very much focused on the Jews. They didn't have a large black population or something to hate. They were just strange foreigners way off in distant lands to them, mostly. But it did have its hate elements. But it was also, unlike sort of the modern replacement elements, it was a holistic ideology. It did have other aspects, like we were just talking about, the idea of that people should have holidays off yearly in concept, should have these types of things. So you have to look at it and understand it in that context. It doesn't make it okay or good or any of the those aspects, but it is part of their ideology to understand who they were and what they were. And this was part of the bedrock that they call strength through joy. They meant it. They wanted the right, correct, and I'm emphasizing this, the right, correct type of German, as they saw it, to be joyful and be joyful of this new world. And that's how they saw it. And that. So, and you have to understand it within the context. It doesn't excuse the hate. It doesn't mitigate the hate. It doesn't mean, well, if we could just have Nazism but without the hate. No, because I think if you also see other aspects, it's a totalitarian system. It is one thing to go, oh, we want autobahns, oh, we want annual annual vacations of 2 years, or of 2 weeks or something like that. That's a reasonable American. But I understand Sweden is annual national vacation of 6 months every year, or whatever it is, some crazy amount of time. The main reason I think Hearts of Iron 4 is delayed, but that's just my crazy American opinion. But so it's one thing to go, hey, but still you can have the ideology that that's the way it should be, and have a libertarian You know, an American, if you know the American Libertarian Party, you can have that as part of an American libertarian ideology. It doesn't mean you need to say, well, there were elements within Nazi ideology is good, so if we could just get rid of the really bad parts and then it would be sort of okay. No, it's still a totalitarian ideology. It is still, even if you get rid of the hate, whether you really would or could or not, it's still the right type of people, the right thinking people, the people that comply with whatever the government's wishes are, and whether, you know, on any aspect, it's a comply thing, and that's where, for me, even if you, like I say, want to try to do a modified version of it, you're still losing me on it. It might not be quite as evil, but it's still not good. So, again, that's my take on it. So yeah, we'll look inside. And this whole, and I look at launching this ship here, as you see, NSDAP gains a little popularity, gains some national unity here, because of not just this one ship, but this one ship is sort of the symptom and flagship of the, you know, the Kraft Deutsch Freud and food strength through joy movement. So, and it was more than just one ship, you know, that many elements of it. So that's inside of the vessel, see it being launched, nice dining rooms, inside pool, sort of somewhat weather controlled, decks for viewing, you know, things, and yes, we need more popularity. So, up to 100% national unity. Could lower this, but we'll start kind of, which I think, just because the natural way of things, it goes down to 99%. Alright, okay, so we've lost 15% plus to metals and 15% or 20% plus to rare materials, which puts us in red. It's the end of the Sino-German cooperation, but we get more of our supplies and money back. Organization Todt. Todt was a decent manager. Don't want to slight him there. You know, I don't know that he was any brilliant guy, but he was definitely competent, or more than competent, at managing. He was an engineer. Again, I don't know how, you know, that I don't think that he was any particularly great engineer or anything. He was good at that, and he was very loyal to Hitler and the Nazi Party. That's him in his SA uniform. That dark uniform is actually a brown uniform, just a trick of the light, black and white photograph. If you see other pictures of him taken in that uniform, with the armband, the red armband shows up as darker than the sort of dark brown, so it just, and red isn't, you know, naturally black or anything, but just the way it's photographed. And that kind of light, it shows up that way, but that's him in his SA uniform. So he was an SA member, of some standing. Forget his rank right offhand. But he was very loyal to Hitler, and Hitler knew it, so he was very much on the rise within Nazi Germany, and he obviously got the primary job or leader element of the putting together the Reich Autobahn, and he was mostly using other assets, shall we say, within the German political and economic state, both like the Holtzmann industrial firm, as well as SA and NSKK assets and whatever for truck drivers and similar sorts of things. But because of his growing element, we have the ability to create Organization Todt, because at this time he is working on the West Wall, because we've already started down that path. And this will sort of continue to formalize this and having the Organization Todt. one of the few, there's obviously also the Hermann Goering Works, one of the few organizations that are named after somebody while they're still alive. So, but he's a very loyal, and I'm trying to stress that he mainly got his job and his rise and responsibility is because of his loyalty within the regime. Not trying to slight his abilities, but it wasn't necessarily that he was the most outstanding person for the job in the competent sense. It was that he was very loyal to the system and Hitler and Hitler's system, but competent enough to get the job done. Don't get me wrong there. And however much it's him picking the right people to take the right, management and design people and all that stuff. That's a good talent to pick the right people. So he was doing the competent job. So that's why he rose in ranks. So we will go with that. Okay. Air bases in southern Germany. Yes, we will go with that. Which we have to remember to. Ooh, a lot of them. Good. Putting them up top. Okay. Give him a little bit of money. Yes, we'll do that. Now we need just a little bit in the red there, but that hit from they want to give me a rare material. Yes. No. Let's go to Soviet Union. We do want to continue building our stockpiles. Since we're talking about rare materials, I really like the new, more detailed system in Hearts of Iron for specific types of rare materials, not just take yours. Energy are continued. We're gonna take that by continue to influence. We need to export to New Zealand. New Zealand never gonna like us that much. Turkey will keep that. Now let's see, somebody like Sweden, do they have access? Maybe they do. We don't sell theirs. Let's check out Finland. They do, but we can't do that. So we'll let that. Okay, battle commander recognition. That's my understanding with that. It helps us get, as the war happens, let us have events that give us battle commanders. Okay, well, is also very useful. So we'll shift that there. The other one we're going to shift it to oh no, that didn't last very long. Japan may have energy to spare. Yes, it does. Let's see if we can buy some energy from them. As a method of cheap, but we will get some. As a method of improving relation. Artillery unit command and control. That is good. Okay, shifted to training. I'm going to now this division here has a movement speed of 4. I don't know how that's going to work out with that. Well, I'm going to build a couple more of these divisions. Build motor torpedo boats and coastal subs, because we have these particularly ready to launch, and these are coming through. No. Well, maybe not enough. Okay, the Großdeutschland Reichswald. Okay, the elections were delayed, publicized over that. This should not be happening, I don't think, at this moment. Looking at this, delayed. This is supposed to be an event that's happening after, because I think so there's something wrong with the code. quite sure what, but okay, we'll go with it. Can't have any choice, but which is right now we have not yet March. Getting there. 39. We haven't met any of the criteria for early occupation of Austria. We'll go with again. Well, no, we're going to put it in the production line. I think that's better, especially now that we're building units. Sure, this actually moves all the way to the top just because it's easier to do. It's not going to push any of our critical factories out of the top. Because whether we're building these units or this unit doesn't really affect other things, but whether we get these factories done does affect their other uses. Money from that. Yep. Okay, Vulcan race. This was another widely spread circulated magazine. It means people and race. Obviously one of the Nazi publications. It promoted the virtues of the Aryan race. From my understanding of the magazine, and there were different similar magazines, different publications, but this one mainly focused, shall we say, as they saw it, on the positive aspects of it, meaning it did not, at least from my understanding, spend a lot of time, and from some of the inside shots that I've seen in the magazine, didn't spend a lot of time degrading other races, where some of them very much did, particularly Jews, but other races as well. This one mainly focused, like I say, on, as they saw it, the positive aspects of the Nazi racial ideology. But one thing that sort of struck me about the photos on the magazine cover here, that they were beautiful people, and that you could generally define them as such. And no, I'm not going to say all people are beautiful or whatever. No, this is the beautiful people, and it's very similar. Like it does say, each issue contains openly anti-Semitic elements, but it's not as degrading as other ones. But it's sort of the beautiful people. And I see similar, without having the title of Vulcan race or people and race, Vulcan Rossi, at my newsstand checkout today. The only difference, as I see it, is for the most part, they're multiracial, beautiful people extolling the virtues of them. This, if you will, lookism, or if you will, this is the ideal, and yeah, okay, it's the ideal, but a strong celebration of it. So I don't know how much we have changed generally as people or whatever at this time, because this talks about it within the Nazi ideology most assuredly, but it's sort of the cover examples and cover art is very similar in many ways to the modern version of this. And so I thought that was interesting. And now the modern, at least in America, the modern version is multiracial, but it's still this, we're putting beautiful people on the cover of the magazine. Not necessarily, unless they're, somebody who just won the Olympics, they might put, a less attractive I mean, obviously they're going to be a physically good specimen, but maybe facially or whatever less attractive person on the cover, because obviously some of those are sports sort of covers. But I think that's half or more just get them in skimpy clothing. And but but they're going to continue to pick out the best ones to put on the cover, and that's what they're sort of doing, and that's sort of what their ideology or idealizing in society is. That in an element of it any different than what we do today? And I'm not trying to knock what we necessarily do today, because I don't know that I'm going to pick up a magazine that's look at it because there's some ugly person on. Well, maybe he's a scientist and I want to read about his thing on science, but that's because it's on science, but not on the various celebrity magazines and other sorts of fitness magazines and Gentleman's Quarterly or whatever, that all have the beautiful people on it. And so that's how I sort of see them, as how we haven't changed, but how we have changed, and also how the Nazis used their propaganda. See, like I was talking a little earlier about history and causes and effects and everything, you also can sort of look at ideologies and marketing of them in different facets and different ways, and how some of it has changed, how it hasn't changed, how they were effective. And so, this is marketing, and this is how the Germans wanted to see themselves, how the Nazis promoted this. I hope you guys are getting what I'm trying to say here. People are still doing it. People will probably always do it. It's not wrong to do, but how strikingly similar that they were using, quote unquote, the beautiful people to promote racism, I guess would be the thing. When not everybody who's of the right racial types are going to be beautiful people, but also through, I guess it's eugenics elements, is that's how they wanted to racially mold over the generations. They weren't to later stages of eugenics to try to manipulate the genes, but they wanted to, in a breeding sense, breed the beautiful people, if you will, as being that. And so that's how they were sort of promoting it. And that's how I sort of wanted to talk a little bit about by showing this viewpoint and how they were using it. So I just find it very, very interesting, as you can tell, that how they did it and what they did and why. So Volk und Rossi. So yep, really, they did it. That's what they did. Materials, yes. Bulgaria, yes. Because I know we're getting more and more factories down. Okay, and these are about ready to all hit. And we're still. Okay, so single engine aircraft has advanced. Freeze up a slot here. As soon as we get that, we're going to start researching the fighter prototype, but let's do the using more and more steel and not so much so. Soviet Union, so we can sell bunches of blocks. Now 50 is impossible, as I say. Okay, well, 20 is very likely. Money problem? Yeah, probably money problem.
Let's try that. That's not enough. Just let's see if that they got the money. We can sell them to Bulgaria. Got the money because we're buying raw materials from them. Let's see if we sell them. Good. If Argentina wants to go on. No. Alright, well, help. Robert Tobler was the served as Gauführer for Zurich on the National Front and ran the party paper Die Front, which I think we already had the event talking about before. We're going to do that, or we will. Elected to the Swiss Parliament, became the only member of the National Front, or indeed any of the pro-Nazi groups. Because a lot of times, I just don't think in whatever, I'm not exactly sure on the Swiss voting system, they would get a significant amount of votes, but not enough to win actual seats in various regions. That's, if I understand the situation correctly, it wasn't a complete proportional system, so it wasn't, like if 5 or 10% of the electorate was National Front, they would get that many seats. So just sort of who he was. If you notice, that pin is the same pin that's down here on there, and the bandage he is wearing is after some head injury, probably real, but maybe a bit overdoing it for the photo, from some battle with communists or the police or somebody, I forget which, if any specified. So I'll get that as part of our notification system setup. Yeah, we'll give him money for that. We want Swedish steel. Okay, aero engines have advanced. That is great. Start researching helicopters, but we're not at the moment. Let's buy some US steel. Okay, the Deutsche Colonial Zeitung, the German colonial magazine. It was edited by Paul Ritter. It was published by the Reich Colonial Bund, which we've already talked about. It definitely covered the former German colonies, but also other foreign aspects, and as well as other Nazi aspects too. But it's sort of that sub-party organization, and this, yes, just proves their relation with South Africa. Direct Fire Unit Command and Control Advance. That's from the third Tanganyika model. Okay. Training. And single engine airframe research. That's what we've been waiting for. We'll move that over to fighter prototype. And which is this? Motorized support units. Okay. Okay, that's definitely too far forward. Research. Creature radio armor. Okay, I think we're going to end this session here. I hope you've been enjoying this and my talking about politics. Let's take a quick look at Spain. Well, there, I guess holding out there. It looks like it's going to be cut off and going to die. And though they've increased their hold here by one province, I don't know that it'll do them any good. In fact, I think it's more of a distraction than anything else. Okay, Shanghai has fallen. Nanjing has fallen. We should be getting an event probably next month covering the fall of Nanjing. It's a dynamic one for TRE. But that is a pretty good advance. Much better than the last game, if you remember. If you were one of those watching. Japan's moves there. So they've got that solidly. We can't see which one looks good. We've been on our allies yet. So they've got the capital, which is then shifted back into here. King, as I would call it. This capital, Tian, is not completely surrounded, but getting so I presume the Japanese will be taking that soon, and probably Shanxi will fall to the Japanese as well. So for the Axis side, good going. So thanks so much for viewing. We will be continuing this shortly. Thanks a lot.